for a lot of people, it might be weird at first, but when they stop attaching their performance, this idea of like performance, and like, am I good enough?
Right.
Oh my God, so much more pleasure is available.
I hope y'all taking notes, man. This is valuable info here. I mean, as soon as I put that story up, I've never gotten so many like question replies to a story than when I put that on.
Where did you put TikTok or Instagram?
On Instagram.
Oh, wow.
Right. And we do a weekly Q&A there, actually bi-weekly now, or twice a week now. During it, I've mentioned a few times, I was like, I've got a sex therapist coming on. So if any of y'all are having problems in the bedroom, which I know y'all ladies are, hit me in the DMs. I got you, girl. And they're like, finally, we could talk about the pressing concerns.
I know.
Because this is like, it is a bit of a stigmatized like topic.
It shouldn't
Isn't
be.
it? I agree.
Yeah.
Did you see, by the way, that Gwyneth Paltrow came out with the new Netflix thing about sex and intimacy?
Yeah.
What do you know about that?
About sex and intimacy, or about her
what she's
specific-
doing in particular?
You know, I haven't seen more than just the trailer, but I imagine it's going to be pretty great because
It's really, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, she did that whole Goop Lab series and talked about sex a few times in a few different ways on that. And I think, you know, Gwyneth Paltrow is really, she's one of the celebrities out there who's using her platform to model strong, empowered sexuality and conversations about sex and intimacy. So I love it.
In like a very healthy, like normalized way, it feels like. I've only seen what she's posted on like Instagram. That's how I found out about it. I was like, I would have never kind of guessed that she would have been the one to like dabble into that. And, you know, out of all people in Hollywood, I feel like she's so perfect for it because she's such a respected, like, you know, actress. And, you know, I was just like, this is great. At least we're opening up this conversation. Have you actually watched it yet?
No, I haven't watched it yet.
I'm very intrigued by it. I want to watch it. I'm curious. Why do you think it is that, like, it's such a stigmatized topic, you know, for something that's like such a human care, like we all got here via sex. Like, what's going on?
Exactly.
Why are we being so shy about this?
I mean, look, we live in a really sex negative world, and it's been that way for a long time. And what sex negative means is that there's really limited views on what is considered appropriate sex, and like who decides that, right? If you look at the science, there's a tremendous amount of diversity on what constitutes healthy sexuality. But socially, we've like sort of constructed this idea of what is okay based on different cultural and religious ideology, and you know, now a lot of political ideology influence this idea of what is considered okay and what isn't. So, you know, sex is bad, it's dirty, it's wrong, it's taboo. I think that was designed a long time ago to create safety and, you know, what would be law way back when, to make sure that people were not getting pregnant when they couldn't, you know, support a family, and, you know, lots of other social mandates that would play a role in that. But it's sort of gotten out of control. And now it's about like shaming people, and it's so much of our identities now.
Right.
You know?
Do you think it's gotten better or worse over the last 10 to 15 years?
Such a great question. I definitely think both are true. It's gotten better and worse because I'm seeing this very bifurcated, so like two-pronged reaction happening in the culture. There's a group of folks who are becoming more conscious, more aware, more empowered, more spiritual, more connected to the world, to each other, to ideas. And then I think there are a lot of people who are really afraid, and their reaction to fear is to become more kind of rigid or to go back to what felt safe. Right. And so I think we've got, you know, a faction of people who are like, things are really hard, I'm going to see what else could be. And then things are really hard, let me go back to what was.
What I am comfortable with. Which honestly, I don't see a problem with either. Like, whatever makes you happy in my head is like, whatever you're comfortable with. Like, whatever you deem fit for your life, If you're happy, you're happy. Live your life the way you want to live your life. You know, my only thing is like, if you're living your life the way you want to live your life, why are you judging others for living their life the way they want to live their life? That's like my only like confusion. You know what I mean?
Well, that's what I think is so interesting about what we're seeing about sex and whether or not it's sanctioned or how it is sanctioned, because I don't even think it's really about sex anymore. I think it's about identity, and it's about tribalism. It's about where do we belong and with whom do we belong. So people adopt ideologies and mindsets sometimes because they believe it, but sometimes because they believe in it because that's what the culture of their most important groups believes. Right? And so to question it would be to maybe even jeopardize if they can stay a part of that group, right? So I think sometimes we kind of get lost.
A little social pressure in a way.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Do you see that a lot with like some of the clients that you work with?
Yeah, I mean, I see it a lot with clients. I see it with, everybody.
That's very interesting. So like, the reason I wanted to bring you on, and I'll be honest with you, well, first, I found you because I was scrolling through my TikTok For You page and one of your videos came up. And then I noticed follows you in the bottom left corner right above your username. I was like, oh, who's this? I always get intrigued. And the topic that you were talking about was very interesting to me. So I went to your page. I saw what you were talking about. I was like, oh, she's a sex therapist. This is intriguing. And honestly, I was like, that made me think, I'm like, what is a sex therapist exactly? Like, I know it exists, but like, I never like really connected the dots of like how and why, and then I went creeping on your page. Oh, she's legit. She's from LA. Like, let me hit her up. And that's when I slid in the DMs. I was like, hey, notice that you follow us. What's going on? You want to do something together? Because my whole goal with this whole thing is like, let's try to impart the audience or the viewers or people with some sort of like information that's going to help them get through life easier, happier, and also let them know, hey, you're not the only one that's dealing with this.
Totally.
That's one thing that we see all the time.
Yeah. Well, I'm so glad that you did reach out, because that's something I'm so passionate about too. Is like, how can we get information to people that helps them feel really empowered in their relationships in general, but in their relationships with sex, right?
Yeah.
And to talk about sex, because when we normalize talking about it in a way that's not salacious or crude or, with a goal of being sexual, then we just kind of give ourselves permission to think about our sexuality a little bit differently, which means we can pay attention to our sexual health differently, pay attention to our sexual boundaries differently, and advocate for our pleasure differently. Right.
Just like get past the stigma and like, let's look at, okay, how can we improve our lives, by talking about this? Okay, so I guess I should intro the episode at this point. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Stripped Down Podcast. If you haven't figured out by now, we talking about sex. And we have a very well-qualified individual here to talk about it with you, because God knows I would fuck this shit up if I was on my own. I'm like, okay, finally, somebody I can have this conversation with that could actually give some really, really insightful information. So, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the podcast, Dr. Kate Balestrieri.
Hello.
Welcome. Thank you so much for doing this, first off.
Yeah, thank you.
And ladies and gentlemen, if you haven't figured out by now, we are going to be talking about sex. And before we started recording this episode, I asked y'all what types of topics and what types of questions that y'all wanted me to ask. And ladies, y'all flooded me in the DMs with all kinds of things. So we're going to address a lot of them. But before we get into that, I want to welcome anybody who's new here. Welcome to the podcast, baby. This is where we just keep it real with y'all, help y'all in any way we can, give our perspective, and hopefully give you something to take away from this that you can apply to your life, help you live happier with your partner, whoever you messing with nowadays, girl. So before we get into this, I want y'all to do me a quick favor. Take 2 seconds of your time. Hit that subscribe button below. Make sure to hit that notification bell so you can get notified anytime that we post these podcasts. Also, feel free to participate in the comment section. Your feedback, your comments, your input, your perspective is very valued to us. We will follow up on any questions that we get in the comment section. So please feel free to participate there. And ladies and gentlemen, we are going to get right into this. I'm going to pull out the chicanery glasses. So, Miss Balestrieri, please elaborate. What is a sex therapist?
Yeah, well, let me just first say I'm a licensed psychologist, right, and a certified sex therapist, and I've got a few other specialties too, mainly around trauma, sex, and relationships and mental health, right?
Interesting.
So a sex therapist is somebody who helps people understand their relationship with sex, especially, in terms of how it might influence their mental health or their well-being in life. So we will help people across tons of different topics, right? Around trauma related to sexuality or non-sexual trauma that might be influencing somebody's sex life. We'll talk to them about their pleasure goals, helping them, have better sex with their partner or on their own. We'll address things like shame and fears, kinks, fantasies, all the fun stuff.
Okay.
Yeah. We help people create an expansive and self-defined definition of what is healthy sex for them, and then help them move from pain points to pleasure points.
Ooh.
And maybe pain, if pain is their pleasure.
Hey, I was about to say that, like literally just as that came out of your mouth, that popped out into my head, because I literally got a comment today that was on a video where I was talking about that.
Okay.
The girl I was seeing at the time, she said something to me along the lines of like, sometimes there's a little pain, but I don't say anything because it turns me on. I'm like, really? That intrigued me so much. Okay, so we could, this conversation could go into a million directions. Okay. Well, let's start with the basics. Okay, so what are some of the most common things that people come to you to help them with? So, some of the things that I just mentioned, healing from trauma, really sort of understanding sexual blocks that they're having, pain during sex that they don't want, or how to make space for pain in sex that they do want, or other fantasies. They want to understand a fetish that they have, or they want to figure out a way to make sense of differences in desire with their partner, right? Whether it's frequency or the kind of sex that they want. If their partner wants something different, we try to find a way to create some agreements there. Sometimes people come to me because they're struggling with compulsivity around sex, and like sex addiction, you mean?
Yeah, that's a term that's pretty polarizing in the community.
Okay, because that was one of the terms or phrases that kind of got brought up a lot.
Yeah.
Okay.
So from a clinical perspective, there's no diagnosis for sex addiction or porn addiction, but compulsivity is the language that we use clinically to address that.
Okay. Hey, listen, I'll be honest, ladies and gentlemen, forgive me, because I am very I'm very naive to a lot of this stuff, especially for the
many people
the acceptable terms, and so feel free to correct me anytime I slip up.
It's okay. That's why we're doing this, right?
Perfect.
Education.
Yes.
All about education.
Hey, listen, I'm in the same boat as y'all right now. I'm learning. I'm taking a lot of mental notes. I got my notepad open. I'm taking all kinds of notes, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah, so we can talk about like sex and porn addiction or compulsive sexual behavior. Sometimes other problematic sexual behavior people will come and talk to me about, or if they're concerned about, how to make sense of their sexual orientation, or they are questioning their sexual orientation, or they've got questions about gender. Really kind of anything around sex, because even if we're asexual or have no sex at all in our lives, or abstinent for whatever reason, everybody has a relationship with sex.
Right. Even if that's like through self-pleasure?
Totally. Yeah.
What is like the most common question that you get from people? I'm sure you probably get a ton of DMs too.
So many.
The look on your face is
so many.
Trust me.
And it's great. I welcome, and I can't get to all of them.
Right.
But
I'm at the same point now as well. That's why we do these podcasts. We take all the questions. Okay, y'all all have a common issue. We're going to address this in the podcast.
Totally.
Right.
Totally. Yeah.
What do you see the most?
It depends on who's doing the asking. But if I kind of condense everybody, probably the biggest theme is, am I normal? Or am I broken? Or is something wrong with me? Right? Because we do have so much shame around sex, and when we don't talk about it, people get lost in a lot of fear around, am I okay?
Right.
In what I like or what I'm experiencing. Second to that, it's usually things like, I can't have an orgasm, or how much masturbation is too much, or
does size matter?
That's a big one from people with
I got that DM too. Ask her if size matters, bro.
Yeah.
Don't tell her who this is from. Keep this anonymous. I'll be like, no worries, my man.
Yeah.
So, okay, those make sense to me. You know, why can't I orgasm with my partner, but I can when I'm
by myself. Yeah.
You know.
Or I get a lot of questions like, my partner has lost interest in sex. What do I do? So things like that.
We touched on a little bit of this in a previous episode. Have you read Robert Greene's book about the art of quote unquote seduction? And are you aware of Shan Bodhi? Is it Bodhi? She's
Shan Bodhi?
Bodhi, yeah. Shan Bodhi. She's great. I love her. I was checking out a couple of her videos in combination with like The Art of Seduction by Robert Greene. And we did an episode earlier this year about sexual triggers and, you know, what type of quote unquote seducer you are and, you know, basically helping you understand your partner and what kind of gets them in the mood. You know, it's because what we all have to understand, although like men and women are a little bit different, especially like younger men compared to older men. It's like we all have sexual triggers. Younger men, it's like, doesn't take much, you know, just show up and hey, he's triggered. but, you know, as you mature, it's like some of the triggers start to come into play. Do you work with, you know, some of your clients' patients in like areas like that as well, help them understand?
Yeah, for sure. So maybe kind of like helpful to think about, where does arousal come from, right? And maybe that's what is being talked about when you're saying sexual triggers. But our arousal comes from a lot of different factors in our lives, like ideas that we have, relationships in the past, sensory data, beliefs about ourselves, beliefs about the world, things that we see around us, different imagery and whatnot, and like biological senses, so our sensations. So when we think about like all the things that allow us to say yes to sex, think about it like that's a gas pedal for arousal. And then anything that might shut us down, right, feels uncomfortable or gross or like it doesn't align with who we are, you might consider that a break. This is called the dual control model, right? And everybody has these yeses and nos for what turns them on. And like what you're saying, when you're younger, sometimes we're sort of more open because we don't know yet. And
it's just one giant button. Anywhere you press on the gas. It's just one giant gas pedal.
It can be.
The brake is like it when we were younger.
Yeah.
For men, is that true for women as well?
So there's some complicated answers to that. Biologically, I think, it is more true for women when they're younger, that they're more open. But when we layer on all of the double standards that women face during sex, judgment is usually a break for women. For sure. So it's hard to know exactly what apples and apples comparison we can make for people of different genders because of all of that constructed ideas about sex related to different genders. Yeah,
that's like a crucial factor in creating that environment that is conducive for pleasure, is creating comfort, which is, you know, all the yeses lining up, and a non-judgment free environment as well.
Totally.
And I feel like that isn't stressed enough to us, like as we're learning about sex and figuring this all out as we go through life, because honestly, like nobody gives us a playbook on this shit.
No.
You know, fucking high school sex ed, fucking y'all gotta rethink this shit because y'all got us out here struggling. We playing fucking trial and error. Like I don't know what's going on. You know what I mean? And we gotta just figure it out on our own. And like none of this is all like foreign. I'm sure a lot of people who are listening. So, you know, it's like, why didn't they teach us this in school, you know, which is another conversation.
That's another conversation for sure.
But I mean, if we could simplify it for everybody, it's just like creating an environment as comfortable as possible, non-judgmental as possible, being open to, you know, the communication of what is truly the desire of your partner without implying any sort of judgment. I feel like helps get your partner to that place of potential pleasure
Yeah, well,
would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, listen, for somebody who's poo-pooing his sex education in high school, you've got it. You have a good grasp
Took a lot
of
of research, a lot of trial and error.
Right? No, but I think you're so
That sounded terrible, by the way. I'm sorry. Hey, y'all know this about me. Don't be looking at me like that. Come on. I'm sorry to interrupt.
That's okay. It's okay to be a sexual being.
See, it's okay, y'all. It's okay. Talking about.
But yeah, so non-judgment, open-mindedness, and there's a really brilliant author named Emily Nagoski. She wrote a book called Come As You Are. So anyone watching, please go check that book out. It's amazing. And in her book, one of my favorite quotes is, "Don't yuck someone else's yum." Right? And this is so important because, again, we attach so much meaning and judgment and shame to different things just because we don't know enough about it to understand how somebody's arousal might have, gotten created in this direction, whereas somebody else's arousal may have been generated and it takes this form. So I think when we can just kind of be a bit more expansive, a bit more open-minded, and recognize that there are lots and lots of ways to have healthy sex. And even though you're not familiar with something or doing it, doesn't mean it's bad or wrong or shameful.
Right. I feel like the best type of response to somebody who's kind of bringing up something that you're kind of like wide-eyed about would be just like almost a sense of curiosity.
Totally.
Like, that's intriguing to me. Like, I kind of want to know how and why you feel that way. Because it's like interesting, one. And then also, if this person is my partner, like, that's going to help me get you there by me understanding. For us guys, like, that's an ego boost if we can help you. It's like, okay, I figured it out. You know what I mean? Like, for us guys, I know this is very immature way of thinking, but we have our egos attached to sex. And, I think everybody does to some degree.
I would invite everybody to detach ego from sex, right? Because when we go into it with that sort of performance, like I've got to hit the prize, I've got to ring the bell or do the thing or whatever, we're not really present with pleasure.
Right. And you're judging yourself.
You're judging yourself, and you're also kind of participating in a charade, because as much as it is helpful that your partner knows what you like and helps you, hit all the right bells and all the right whistles, ultimately we are responsible for our own orgasm, right? So that means that we have to communicate with our partner if something's not feeling right, or if they're not in the right spot, for example, or not hitting the right bell, or whatever language you want to use. So, it's so important, I think, to kind of maybe like take a step out of that responsibility,
right?
And see what it's like to be sexual without doing that. And for a lot of people, it might be weird at first, but when they stop attaching their performance, this idea of like performance, and like, am I good enough?
Right.
Sex is even more amazing.
Right. And just letting it flow.
Yeah.
Not judging yourself, not judging them. Almost like, I kind of relate this to like being on stage, even though that is like a performing.
That is a performance.
But when we do like step on stage, because we toured for years, like there's a certain like, you turn your brain off. You completely like turn your brain off and like you just let it flow. I MC the show, I host the show. I don't think about what I'm gonna say. I just go out and I just let it flow. And I feel like when I'm in that mode, I get the best reactions from the audience.
Totally.
I connect with the audience the best. I get the most like laughs and whatnot, because it's just, and I'm not stressed about it at all. So I feel like it's almost similar to that in a way. It's like, stop judging yourself. Who cares? We're going to figure this out. Whatever. If it's not perfect, who gives a shit? You know what I mean? And we're going to continue to get closer and closer. And then also that allows you to be more receptive to what is actually going on. You know what I mean? So you could like start to read the body language, and you could start to like listen in on like audio cues and start to navigate a little bit more, naturally and accurately.
Totally.
When you're not thinking about, okay, what am I doing? What should I be doing? You know what I mean? Right.
Yeah.
Would you agree?
When you're more, I absolutely agree. When you're more present with your partner, you can be more tuned to the feedback that they're actually giving you. Right. And when you're not performing, you're giving real feedback.
Yeah.
With the way that you moan, the way that you move, the way that you arch your back or, touch your partner, all the things. And that being present with each other in that way allows you to create a lot more heat, a lot more depth, a lot more movement, a lot more passion, whether it's a casual or a committed context, right?
Yeah.
So presence is a gift when you're being sexual. Performance takes you out of that, and it essentially means that you're masturbating with another person's body.
Right. And is that, now that you bring that up, is that something that gets brought up in conversation with all the time? That's like an issue. I can imagine it can be, like, especially with the amount of like self-judgment and whatnot we all experience during sex. So what effect does that have on a person?
Which part?
When they feel like they're being used basically for the other person to quote unquote masturbate.
So it depends, right? Because when it's explicit and it's consensual, it can be a huge turn on for some people. Not for everyone, but a lot of people get really turned on by being used or degraded, or they have that kink, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's very healthy and fun to play that out as long as it's conscious and consensual. Right? But what I'm talking about is unconscious, not consented to, not explicit or more implicit, ways of not being present, and so therefore kind of using each other. I just want to make that really clear, because I don't want to yuck someone's yum.
Right.
But
that's really great that you brought that up, because I understand what you're saying when you say that.
Yeah, I mean, and I think when somebody's kind of not present and they are just sort of using another person's body to get themselves off, either in their mind or sexually, they feel it. The other person feels it. And if they didn't sign up for that, it can feel really shameful. It can feel awful, dehumanizing.
What should somebody in that position do to communicate to their partner, hey, this ain't working for me, bro? You know what I mean?
I mean, saying that would help.
Hey, there you go. Hey, bro, this ain't working for me. That's what you gotta do. Just like, hey.
Yeah, you can do it a lot of different ways. You can verbalize it and say something like that. You can make eye contact or use your body language to bring them back into an experience of being present. I would encourage you not to shame your partner while you're having sex.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say, because like these types of conversations are tough, like especially like in the midst of the moment, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's like, how do you say it without saying it, right? It's just like, I'm trying to think like from just experiences that I've had. It's always been like, you know, I actually love it like when you do this, like, can you know, go a little slower or whatever. And it doesn't take you out of the mode at all. Like but I feel like it's on us to take that feedback and apply it, right? Don't ignore it. I think that's the most important thing. It's like, allow them to communicate, make them feel comfortable in communicating, and then apply it.
Totally.
So that way, you know, we're all enjoying this experience together.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
Exactly. The other thing that can be really helpful is normalizing what's called aftercare. So like a period of debriefing after you have sex, where you maybe spend some time talking about, what did you like? What didn't you like? What did it feel like when I did X, Y, Z? Oh, I really liked that. Or, you know, actually that didn't hit the spot today, but usually I do like it. Right? And giving each other constructive feedback and debriefing what you just did, and then taking some time to take care of each other so you can transition from whatever sexual experience you just had back into your non-sexual lives.
Right.
It can be really helpful.
So that's like cuddling and, you know.
Yeah, huddling,
hey,
giving
fellas,
each other a warm towel, drink of water.
I was just going to bring up the towel. Hey, fellas, don't be throwing no towels at your girl, too. Take care of your girl, man.
That's right.
You know, rude, bro. Chicaterous. I know there's somebody listening to that's like, amen right now, right, ladies? So, okay, so aftercare is very important.
Yes.
Having that conversation is very important. I feel like that conversation becomes much easier and like much more comfortable and not as awkward. Like once you've like, honestly, just talk about it. Just bring it up. It doesn't have to, doesn't have to be an awkward conversation. Like you could bring it up, like start it off by like, oh my God, like when you did this, that was amazing.
Exactly.
You know, like what next time, like, would you be down to try this, that, or the other thing?
Right.
Or, like, I think that this would be like really fun to try. What do you think? Like it could be like that type of conversation. It doesn't have to be like, okay, let's break out the notepad and tell.
Right. I wouldn't get out your red pen.
Here's a survey.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because I think that is a thing that we all think about after the fact. Is like, how did we do? Like, what could I have done better? Like, you know, we almost don't want to ask because we're afraid of the negative feedback.
Yeah.
But honestly, like, you should almost anticipate that, hey, it's not gonna be a perfectly orchestrated,
No.
symphony the first time.
Anytime.
Right?
It's not going to be perfect anytime because we're dynamic creatures, right? Like your mood changes.
Yep.
And so
your appetite, what you're in the mood for at that changes.
Exactly. Right.
Yeah.
You might love when your partner nibbles here or does this there most of the time. And then one day you're hangry and you stop to have sex first. Right. And it just doesn't hit you the right way. So, I mean,
write that down, fellas. Feed her first.
We're dynamic, right? We can't expect that everything is going to be exactly the same each time we have sex.
Right. As long as you communicate, hey, you down? What you in the mood for?
Right.
Is it like, okay, so I've kind of gotten to a place in my kind of, what would you call it, sexual journey or
sure,
life or whatever, where I like take pleasure in giving pleasure. And when I sense that the other person is enjoying, it became less about me and more about them, right? And is that bad? Is that a bad thing? Let's start there.
Why would it be a bad thing?
Because then wouldn't that lean on like performative or
well, if you're doing it to be performative, if you're doing it for ego, right? I'm not going to say it's a bad thing, but I might invite you to think about what's your goal and is it a mutual goal? Right? There's nothing wrong with trying to give your partner pleasure and really, being attuned to whether or not they're into it. If it's something that, again, you're doing and it's taking you out of the moment, then again, like only you can decide, is it good or bad? And if your partner's like, hey, I love when you do that, that's amazing, cool. If it works for you guys, that's great. Right.
I think there is part ego in it now that you bring that up. But then there's also like a genuine like satisfaction that comes from it as well.
Totally.
You know what I mean? Like a genuine like arousal. Like this is what's getting me going right now. Like if I can get you going, it's gonna get me going. Let's start there.
Yeah.
And then we could get into everything else. So like I found myself at that place and I'm kind of like wondering how did I get here? Right. And I'm sure this would take an entire therapy session to figure out, but for the most part it's been nothing but positive feedback. So I'm not complaining about it, but I'm just kind of curious, like how can somebody else maybe get there? Because like it's worked for me. In other words, it's like, okay, so how can somebody else who maybe is listening, who's like still trying to figure this whole thing out, get to a place where they're thinking less about themselves and more about their partner, being open and non-judgmental of themselves. Like how do they get there?
That's a great question. I think it's a process, right? And I would encourage anyone listening to that question and for that answer to remember that we're not like light switches, right? We don't just like, okay, I'm going to do this now, and then we go on that path. When we're talking about sex, it's nuanced and it's dimensional, and it's, if we're lucky, a constant state of learning and exploration. So every experience that you have to be sexual with yourself or with someone else gives you a chance to learn more about what you like and what your partner likes. And so again, we're not static creatures. Like your partner might love something this way today and tomorrow be like, not so much. So that's why I think if you approach sex as if it's like a solo or a co-created adventure, right, then each experience gets to be its own, and you get to have fun unwrapping it together and really sort of living it each day. Right. And so I think taking yourself out of like a script of this is how I should show up is the best way to start challenging what can be, because you get to build it as you're there and build it with the ingredients that are present, right? Which is really exciting.
And the experience and what you guys have both learned about yourselves, you're bringing that into it. So would you say, does that lean on the idea of like, forgive my terminology here, self-pleasure for the purpose of self-discovery?
Sure.
Like meaning like, because I had a guest on, he goes by Lawrence the Energy Master.
Okay.
And his whole thing is like, he's a Tantra master.
Cool.
And we were kind of touching on the topic of sex. And he was advocating highly for self-pleasure, learning yourself. Like learning yourself so that way you know kind of like what's working for you, what you like, what you don't like, and
Absolutely.
you're bringing that into the equation. Would you say that at least for most people is a great starting point?
Totally, yeah. Solo sex is a great way to figure out the ins and outs of your own body and to learn about how your body responds to lots of different kinds of stimuli, right? So for some people, you know, they've decided that solo sex is not part of what they want their life to include because it has maybe caused problems in their life or maybe they've struggled with compulsivity or something. But otherwise, I would say it's a really, really important part of sex, even if you have a partner, to know what you like. Yeah.
So that kind of like segues into a common question that was brought up, which was bringing self-pleasure into the bedroom area with a partner.
Oh, yeah.
So that is something that a lot of people are having a hard time kind of presenting to their partner or getting their partner to accept, meaning like bringing toys in the bedroom. You know what I mean? Like bringing toys into the bedroom, bringing some of your self-pleasure practices into sex life with your partner.
Yeah, so partnered sex.
Partnered sex.
Yeah.
There you go. So I told y'all I was ignorant to this stuff, man. I'm struggling. Bear with me, y'all.
Totally okay.
So,
like, can we just pause for a second and think about, like, this is how messed up a sex negative culture makes us, right?
Exactly.
Like,
See,
we don't even know
I'm
what to say
lost.
or how to describe it, and you're so not alone in that.
Right.
And it's okay to just find words that work.
Right. Okay. So how do we get these Franks out there to accept the toys in the bedroom? You know what I mean? Not have their ego wrapped up in it. I don't know what the big deal is personally. I don't know. Like, it's like, cool, I got a little wingman with me, like, to tag team. Great, perfect. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, when I do my best to step into what it might feel like to be really concerned about whether or not you're bringing your partner pleasure, I can understand why people have some fear around bringing a toy into the bedroom. But I really think that if we start to uncouple our identity with the experience of sexual pleasure, it becomes a lot easier to make space for the things that actually help pleasure become more possible. And solo sex with a sex toy is a very different experience than partnered sex with a sex toy. So even if, you know, somebody's like, oh, a toy, I don't know, is it going to change our dynamic? It might, but it's definitely going to be a different experience than the experience your partner has on their own with that toy, because you cannot replace the human connection. Right? And you're going to move that toy in a way that your partner won't. And there's something really beautiful about surrendering to a partner and letting them play with you. Right? And that's regardless of gender. But I think, you know, when we look at it as an augment and as a way to enhance what we already bring to the table, it can feel more accessible.
Think of it as a weapon upgrade, bro. You know, you just upgraded you just got to upgrade. You know what I mean?
Well, it's kind of like think about, like, I love how a lot of people like will get a cool car and then they add all these really interesting accessories to it, right? Like you add the sound system, you add the spoiler thing on the back, or like you tint the windows, you get like all the cool things. You add the accessories.
You're still driving the car, bro.
You're driving the car, and the car's a badass car, right?
Yep. And she's still like looking at you like you're a badass driver. See? That's a really great way to put it. I always try to look for analogies. I love that you brought that up. That was great. So yeah, I think what you said earlier is like separating yourself from the, I can't remember exactly how you put it, but I interpreted that as like taking your ego out of it.
Totally, yeah. Separating our worth from our pleasure.
Right.
Right?
I think that's
so
what
important.
It is like when our partner brings in a sex toy, it almost implies it's like, okay, is what I'm bringing to the table not good enough? Is that not enough?
Yeah.
Right.
And that's a painful place to live.
Right.
Right? But when we decouple worth with pleasure, oh my God, so much more pleasure is available.
I hope y'all taking notes, man. This is valuable info here. So I got a ton more questions like that, but I do want to touch on a couple of questions that I was really curious about. One was like, what made you want to get into this field, and how long have you been doing it now?
I've been in the field of psychology for about 16 years. So I got into this work psychology is a second career for me. And when I got into it, I really thought that I was going to kind of blend together this career and my love of true crime. So I was going to be a criminal profiler and do all this expert witness testimony. And I did all of that. I used to work in prisons, multiple prisons. For a long time, I worked with convicted sex offenders and did evaluations and treatment and court testimony around that kind of work. And then I've done lots of other forensic evaluations. And eventually, I just really started getting more curious about what the role of sex actually plays in people's lives, because a lot of the people that I've been working with, sex was a pain point or a power point. And so I was just curious about all of the other ways that people related to sex and their mental health. And eventually I went into private practice and started working more with compulsive sexual behavior, and then became even more expansive in my understanding of sexuality and mental health and relationships, and became a certified sex therapist.
Shit.
And here we are.
That's badass, girl. First off, kudos to all that. That's like that. I didn't know that backstory. That was great. You were a badass, like little forensic detective. I'm just like imagining just a badass depiction of you. I was just like, damn, okay, shit. And then I noticed also you started a website that educates people on this, Modern Intimacy.
Yeah, so that's my group practice, and yeah, that's our website. So all of the clinicians who work with me blog, and we write about lots of different topics.
Yeah, I was peeping it a little bit.
What'd you see?
I didn't want to like peep too much because I wanted to keep the curiosity. Like I wanted to get it from you, So, but I saw a few thumbnails and a few titles that I think y'all would be interested in. So go check that out if you get the chance. modernintimacy.com.
Yeah,
Is that correct, right?
Yeah, that's right.
So that's kind of how you got here, right? So one other thing that I definitely want to touch on, because I feel like this would be really, really helpful information. You mentioned that you used to work with sex offenders, people who were in prison, who have committed these terrible things.
Yep.
So here's one thing that I feel like would be helpful for a lot of the women that are listening is like, are there any things that any patterns that can be recognized for people to kind of like spot as they're out dating and creating relationships, and
how to spot a predator?
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. I can talk about that a little bit. But one thing I just wanted to add to what you said is it's not just women who are victimized, right? People of all genders are victimized and sought out by predators. Typically, adult cisgender men are victimized more physically and women more sexually. And the trans community and non-binary community also experience a tremendous amount of sexual violence and physical violence. But in terms of children, there are many children of all genders who are victimized. So I just want to highlight that, because I think sometimes we have an idea that it's only women who get abused,
right.
And that's just not.
I'm really happy that you actually pointed it out, because that's like the first thing that I default to, and I shouldn't, right?
So many people do. Yeah. So I wanted to highlight that so that any people who are not identifying
Another reason is because I know my audience is 95% women, so don't come for me too much, ladies. Okay, so like, what are some like things?
Yeah, so how to spot a predator, right? There's a couple of different kinds of grooming strategies that predators use. And to groom someone is to get them ready to be violated. And usually in a way that makes them think that it's okay. So it's very insidious, right? As opposed to an aggressive, spontaneous assault where somebody's they don't know you very well. They're not trying to get to know you. So grooming is like, I'm going to include myself in your life. I'm going to get to know you, and I'm going to make it easier for me to get access to you in a way that I want to suit my needs. So the first grooming strategy is what's called an enmeshment strategy. And this is where somebody kind of like buddies up to you. There's a lot of pseudo-intimacy, a lot of intensity, love bombing. They make it so that you feel like you're one, right? Really fast in a way that is not demonstrative of healthy, sustainable intimacy. So this might look like buying you gifts that are kind of disproportionate or out of context. It might look like declaring love or bombing you with all kinds of flattery and ingratiating comments, making themselves useful to you.
In a very short period of time.
Very short period of time, right? Yeah. Not to be confused with like being a genuinely good person who's like, hey, do you need help with that? Yeah, I'm free on Saturday. I can help with that. Cool. That's different than...
saying hello at the bar. Hey, I want to invite you to a yacht party and I want to spoil you and this, that, and the other thing. Like,
I mean, that could be fun, but it could be grooming. We don't know. So it's kind of...
So what would be the differentiating, like...
Well, you want to come on my yacht this weekend? I'm having a party. Could just be a nice invitation where no predatory behavior is intended. But there could also be a lot of predatory behavior intended if someone's like, come on my yacht again, come on my yacht again. And then next time they might ask you to do a favor on the yacht. So grooming is about like, let me try to get away with something. So let me push a boundary and see what I can do. So they might say, come on my yacht and don't worry, we won't be sexual. But then they ply you with alcohol or other substances and start getting you more loosened up. And, you know, it could look like, I know we said we weren't going to be sexual, but come on. We've got such a good bond. We have such a good connection. That's an enmeshment grooming strategy, right? We are special. We are unique. We've got something. This is really dynamic. It's implied and forced intimacy and connection.
How does that differentiate from like general flirting and like getting to know somebody?
Yeah, great question. So consent is always the imperative piece here, right? And if somebody is manipulating you, they're not giving you all the information you need to make an informed decision about what's going on.
They're not being upfront with their intentions, their true intentions.
Totally, yeah. They're being duplicitous. It's different than like somebody's flirting, but you're like, I'm not feeling that today. And they're like, cool. And they respect a boundary.
What's a counter kind of measure you could kind of... Because the one thing that I'm like, as you're saying that, is like, okay, if somebody invites you like to all these things and whatnot, like one way of like feeling out the situation, you cool if I bring a friend? You cool if I bring my guy friend? You cool because if his intentions are pure, he should have no problem with that. Well, look, or that person should have no problem with that, right?
People can invite people out on dates and like invite them with the hope of being sexual, but grooming somebody is different. It's usually a long game strategy. Like, I want to have something from you, but I want you to kind of give it to me without me asking, is what grooming really is about. It's getting you ready to do something that I know you don't want to do. So it's insidious, right? It's very different than consenting adults saying, hey, we're going to get together and flirt and have fun, and if something happens, it happens.
Right, okay.
Right? But grooming is more like, this person's told me they don't want to have sex for a long time, but I really want to have sex with them. That's kind of all I want. So I'm going to just play along with this charade, and I'm going to push some boundaries, and I'm going to see what I can get away with.
There's a subtle pull.
Exactly. It's a subtle pull.
Throughout.
It might look like you saying, I want to take things slow. And they say, cool. But then they sit down right next to you and put their hand on your leg. And if you are okay with that, they might see what else they can get away with, right? Maybe they move their hand and then they start kissing you. And if you say, okay, that's enough, well, then they might kiss you a little bit more and see if they can get away with it. So it's about kind of creating an illusion of closeness and intimacy to keep pushing your boundaries. And that's the thing to really notice.
I think in a tell is like, how strictly do they respect your boundaries?
Yes, you should only have to say no or intimate no once.
Right.
That's it.
And if they persist beyond that, hit that Uber app. We out. Like, we talk about this all the time. It's like, pay attention to how somebody respects your boundaries. Because if they have a genuine respect for you and a genuine interest in you as a person beyond what you have between your legs, they are going to respect the boundaries. I can't stress this enough, you know, and be firm with the boundaries. So that kind of brings up another topic. It's like, how can somebody enforce their boundaries, you know, without putting themselves in a place of like danger, compromise, or discomfort?
I wish I could answer that question, but you can't, because if somebody wants to violate your boundaries, they're going to try to violate your boundaries, right? And to say that women or anybody could prevent it puts onus on them and is, kind of a victim blaming or victim
right, I understand.
Loading kind of statement. So what is important to remember is that if what you are responsible for is trying to create safety for yourself in the best way that you know how, right? So if you don't know people and you want to get to know them, you get to decide what that means to you. You get to decide that you want to take your time. If you're feeling like, I don't know if I can trust these people or this person, maybe slow it down and look for things that give you indicators of reliability, trustworthiness, respect for your boundaries, or not. But even if you decide you want to go on that yacht, no one has the right to do anything to you that you haven't consented to. So it's not your fault or responsibility if they do. Gotcha.
That's a really valuable point that you make there. I'm thinking like just, okay, we're in a situation where, okay, this guy has done a great job of like leading a girl into believing that, hey, you can trust me, we're good. The reason I bring this up is because a video popped up on my feed where there was a young lady that described a situation like this where everything was going great. He said all the right things. They end up at his place, and she explicitly said, hey, she had some hesitation and voiced that to him, and he reassured her, hey, no, don't worry about it, nothing's gonna happen or whatever. And then exactly what you described, the touching and then trying to cross the boundary. It's like, what tools can we give people that do end up in those situations?
Yeah, so
strategies to use.
Like with somebody that you don't know or somebody that you're getting to know, it's probably a good idea to have an exit strategy for any situation that you're going to put yourself in. Like if you're going to go to their house for the first time, maybe, if you really are questioning whether or not you can trust them to respect your boundaries, might be a good idea to
find that out beforehand.
Yeah, exactly. Find it out beforehand. Slow it down a little bit before you put yourself in a space where something could happen. Again, I don't want to put onus on somebody who is victimized because we should be able to trust people's words and their intentions, but sometimes, we can't. But, create a safety plan. Let it be known that somebody knows where you are right now, right? And even create some bookends. So talk to your friends and say, hey, I'm going to this place. I'm going to be there for about 3 hours, and then I'll text you when I leave. Or I'm going to stay there overnight, but we're not going to have sex. If you get a text from me, something's funny, call me back and, do all the things to kind of, and let the person know, like, my friends know I'm here, or I told my friends we weren't having sex tonight, and like make it really clear. Yeah,
be explicitly clear about your expectations, your boundaries, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And honestly, for anybody who's listening who's like experiencing somebody who's a little reluctant to trust you, and you are a good guy, let's say you are a good guy and you have you shouldn't take that the wrong way at all. You know what I mean? You should, and to understand where she's coming from, understand like these things happen. It's like she has every right to not trust to begin with, and hey, that's cool if your job to begin with is to earn that trust. You know what I mean? And that is a process for any human being, especially if you could put yourself in their shoes for a second. Like you could clearly understand, doesn't take much to really understand where this person's coming from. And it results in a much better relationship for both parties. You know what I mean?
Totally.
So,
you want another fun analogy?
Yes, please. I love analogies. Try to incorporate them as often as possible.
So let's imagine that you have this car, right? Same car from before. You put a lot of money into it, a lot of time into it. You love this car. It's amazing. And then somebody says, can I drive that car? And you're like, do you have a license? And they're like, yes. And you're like, have you ever been in a car accident? And they're like, no. And then you're like, okay, cool, but do you have insurance? And they're like, of course. And then you're like, okay, just around the block, though, just around the block. And they take your car and they drive to Riverside and back, right? Or they take your car to Arizona, and when it comes back, there's dents in it, there's like animal stuff because they've hit something. Like there's just, it's a mess, right? Your car's destroyed. And you didn't consent to that. the next time someone asks to borrow your car, you're going to be a little bit more gun shy.
Right.
And you'll probably ask a lot of the same questions, and you're just going to have to trust that the answers are what they are, and that person's not going to smash your car too.
Right.
But let's say they do.
Right.
And then the next time somebody asks to drive your car after you've gotten it all fixed up and repaired, like, trust takes time to build when you've been hurt.
And you could easily see how that person will never want to trust somebody with their car again.
Totally.
You see? So it's just like, if you're the person that wants to, quote unquote, borrow the car, it's like, understand, hey, this person has dealt with a lot of bullshit, a lot of bullshitters. You know what I mean? So it's just like, we have to provide further proof of insurance. Here's my Carfax. Here's all. Exactly. It's like, cool, whatever. I got it on deck. My history's clean. I have no problem providing all this information because I know I'm a man of my word or whatever. And I got it all right here. I understand where you're coming from. That shit looks beat up. So here. Let me put your mind at ease.
Right.
Is that a good way to kind of...
Great way to approach it, yes. Carry your Carfax in your pocket.
You got to, man. Keep that Carfax on deck and understand, hey, if they're asking for the Carfax, don't take that personal. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And maybe it wasn't even their car that got smashed. Maybe it was their friend's car.
Yeah, and they heard about it, and it happened to them, and now they don't want... to like go through the same thing they went through, right? So you can understand where the reluctance is coming from, you know. And what I feel like a lot of people don't fail to realize is how common it actually is.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. Car crashes and sexual assault.
Right. I was talking about So, but like, can you actually provide any sort of like just soft data just to give a general sense?
Yeah, absolutely. So depending on the research that you look at, it's anywhere between 1 in 3 or 1 in 4 women have experienced some sort of sexual abuse or assault before the age of 18, and 1 in about 5 or 6 men. And then for people who identify as trans and non-binary, those numbers are even higher. Something like, I think the last statistic I read was something around 60% of them have experienced some kind of sexual harassment or violence, at some point in their lives through college. Yeah. So
I would assume that these are you work with a lot of people who have, like, this is something that gets brought up, like something that people struggle with. What is your advice to people who actually got a DM about this of like, I've been through sexual trauma and it's hard for me to interact with a new partner, and is there an appropriate time to bring that up? How soon should I bring it up? How do I navigate this? Such a great question. Yeah, and it's really personal, right? I can't give a carte blanche answer for every survivor, because every survivor has their own concerns about it, their own level of assimilation in terms of, I hate to use the word accepting, but sort of like accepting that something has happened to them and moving forward in their lives. So it sort of depends on where you're at in that process. And I think one of the things that's most important is to think about, what's your motivation for sharing the information with someone, and how will you feel if they respond really well? How will you feel if they don't respond well? And if you're not prepared for them to not respond well, it might not be the best time to take the risk in talking to them. What do you mean by like not respond well? Like react like... It's different for everybody, right? So for some people, not responding well might mean minimizing their experience, or gaslighting, or victim blaming, or doing something to be shaming, or not understanding, or not empathic. For some people, not responding well could mean asking a lot of questions and wanting to know more, because they're trying to be kind and receptive, but it actually is starting to feel uncomfortable. Gotcha. Survivors don't always want to talk about the details. So it could mean different things to different people. So now this is a question for the person who is interacting with somebody who is a survivor. What is the best way for them to respond to that information? Yeah, so if somebody shares with you that they are a survivor, I think, it's important to be really intentional and hold space for them, right? And what I mean by that is, it's okay to have some empathy and say, I'm so sorry you went through that. How can I support you in this moment? Or
how can I support you if and when we are sexual? What do you need from me? And I think it's okay to ask questions like that. It's really important to educate yourself on what the implications of sexual trauma are, because it's vast. I actually, on my YouTube channel, have about an 1.5-hour webinar that I did about the multiple dimensions of impact of sexual trauma and how people can cultivate hot sex after trauma. Right?
Oh, really?
So, yeah.
What's the YouTube channel name, girl?
Modern Intimacy.
Modern Intimacy on YouTube?
Yeah.
Awesome.
So
okay.
people can check it out. It's a free resource. That's a great thing, actually, to watch with a partner if you want to get some mutual understanding of what it means to, what are like the possibilities of impact, and then how you specifically have been impacted or your partner has been impacted.
When I asked that question, I was like asking myself that question at the same time, because I actually got that DM from somebody a few months ago, and I try to process it myself. Like, how would I handle that situation? First, I would say that I'm appreciative of knowing and understanding that there is something that I need to be aware of, because that helps me. One, communication is always great. It helps you understand your partner better. It helps you navigate like what's going on, so you're not misinterpreting anything the wrong way, right? So that information and sharing that is, very appreciated, right? And in my head, it was just like, okay, that just means we're gonna take it really slow. No big deal, cool. Like, and I'm not gonna make a big deal about it. And I want to kind of feel out what you're comfortable talking about and kind of what pace you want to go at, and kind of let you take the wheel, so to speak.
Beautiful.
Right?
Right, yeah. Because think about it, when somebody has experienced a trauma, one of the things that is the most profound is that their autonomy has been taken from them in that experience. So one of the biggest gifts you can give a survivor, if you are, in their life, is to honor their autonomy in the process, right? And what that means is that you don't want to assume that you know what they need.
Right.
Right? Because a lot of survivors are okay with having sex on the first stage. Some aren't, right? You want to just not make assumptions about what you think they need to be okay. You want to ask them, let them tell you and guide you in that.
Right.
Yeah, so.
I just want to add to that is, like, I brought this up a few times before in previous episodes. I want to reiterate it now, is I've always said, like, the best kind of approach, and personally for me, is like to quote unquote let them lead the dance, regardless of like this, what you know or don't know. Let them lead the dance, and then you'll find out.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Meaning, like, if she steps one way, you step one way. If she steps this way, you step that way. If she takes a step back, you take a step back. If she takes a step forward, you take a step forward. And you let her lead the dance, and then you pay attention to the signal. It's like when she's ready to be dipped, meaning, hey, I'm ready for you to take a little bit of control here. Cool. Yeah. Okay, we ready. But also be prepared to allow her to, step in and take control, put her hands on the wheel and start to drive. Is that a good, like, overall umbrella approach for,
I think it's a great approach. I would maybe, if I can offer just of one little tiny caveat, tiny thing to think about. Instead of saying, I would let her, right, which implies that you're still in control, it's sort of like, I'm going to meet her.
Be okay with.
I'm going to meet her. Right? We're both going to do this, and I'm going to mirror, and I'm going to watch, and I'm going to observe and acknowledge that neither one of us has the power.
Right.
I'm going to just be present with.
So what's the best way for me to rephrase that? Okay, I need to rephrase that. So no more let her lead the dance. It's meet her dancing or what?
Yeah, like how would I'll meet her where she's at.
Meet her where she's at.
Yeah.
Mirror her.
Meet her, mirror her, communicate with her.
Right.
Right? Because I think it's also important that we check in with each other, because feedback is key, but nonverbal communication can mean a lot of different things.
Right.
Right? So if she takes a step back, maybe it's because she's nervous, but wants to be with you. Maybe it's because she isn't ready yet. Maybe it's because she has indigestion. We don't know, right? Like, it's important to be communicative and to be attentive.
That's one thing I have to bring up now is, like, there is a bit of confusion sometimes, because this has happened to me so many times where, like, I'm completely okay with whatever way this goes, but then I hear one thing and then the true intention is different because they want me to be the one initiating. And I'm not, like, personally, I'm not, like, No, I'm not playing that game. I don't want that. That puts me in an uncomfortable position only because it's like, it isn't explicitly stated that this is what you want. Like, okay, if I get it, I get it. But if it's not talked about, then, I'm not. So what's the deal with that?
Well, I think the deal is that we don't normalize talking about sex, boundaries, and expectations and hopes like we do talking about what we're going to order off of a menu. Right. So when you meet someone for the first time, you don't know what they want. You probably don't even know what you want in relation with them yet. So I think if we project a lot of expectations onto each other based on ideas that we have about how we should show up, and there's that performative piece again, right? And we attach so much worth to whether or not we're desired, or whether or not we get a yes, or whether or not this happens, or whether or not that happens. So I think, anyone listening, one of the biggest takeaways here is to remember that everyone's coming from their own unique perspective about what they hope for, what they fear, and what each behavior means to them. So we have to really practice being non-assumptive and instead check in with each other.
Right. So what would that okay, let's say, because this happened a few times. It's just okay, what's the best way for somebody who does want that result? I want you to initiate without telling them I want you to initiate. You know what I mean?
Such a good question. And it's tough because I think if there weren't so much shame around women owning their own sexuality, this would not be an issue because
I think that's a big root of it.
Totally, right? And I think that if women were not shamed for wanting to be sexual, then they wouldn't be conditioned to feel like somebody else has to bring them into it. So the question is, do they actually want to be sexual, or do they want to be desired? And I don't know, right? Right. So I think if you want to be sexual, it's okay to be like, hey, I'm cool with something. Are you?
Right. And I think one thing that the partner can do in that situation is also imply that, hey, there's no judgment here. Whatever it is that you desire or are in the mood for, or whatever way you see this going, I'm not judging you. Establishing that kind of as early on as possible. That way, none of that kind of misinterpretation or miscommunication occurs later on, when that time comes. Would that be kind of a good piece of, or a good kind of a mentality?
Yeah, totally. I think that's great to let a partner know that you won't judge them whether they want to have sex or not. Yeah. And know that you're one piece of the puzzle, right? Because they also have their own internal moral compass and the voices of their family and their friends and how they perceive society at large. So it's bigger than just the person we're on a date with. And I think that's a piece that sometimes we forget about. Yeah. Right?
Didn't even occur to me until you just said it. I'm like, damn, that makes sense. Shit.
Right.
Yeah, it's just there's so many different factors. That's why I think I understand why it could be so,
what do you do?
Yeah, what do you do?
So I think if you get that text or that call that sounds like, hey, why didn't you make a move?
Right. Are you not into me like that? It's not that. It's just,
I think that's a great opportunity for you to say things like, I'm really attracted to you, and one of the things that's really important to me is that we are verbal about what we want and that we're both on the same page. So let's hang out again and see what happens. Right. I think you can talk about, I want consent. I want to know that you want it. And if that's something that you're down for, make it known, and we can talk about it. And sometimes it can be helpful to define what your no is together, right? Here's the boundary. I'm cool with just about anything if we're feeling it up to this point, right? And talk about that beforehand. But if you don't want to do that, it's okay to bring it up on the date and kind of talk about hey, I'm kind of in the mood for fill in the blank.
And if this is somebody that you're kind of new with, I feel like that wouldn't really be too appropriate for a guy to say to a girl, right? It would have to be her, but the guy implying, hey, I got no judgment here. And then if she says that, it's okay, cool. We're on the same page.
Look, I might be a little bit more, what's the word I want to use? I am not the norm when it comes to these conversations, probably because of the work that I do. But I think it's okay for men to say things like, no pressure, and and I think I'm kind of feeling a vibe here. So if you're open to it, I'm open to having that conversation. I'm okay with that.
Right.
But no pressure.
Right. And actually meaning that, like, the genuine, like, authenticity behind that statement can be felt.
Yeah.
And I feel like that is really important to keep in mind, because then it truly does allow the other person to feel comfort and judgment free to really, divulge whatever true desires they have.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And one thing that I was going to just mention, just for like as a fun fact for the ladies, us guys, we love feeling that sense of desire too. Totally. So it's like when it is reciprocated, that's partially why I don't like I want to feel the sense of desire too. It's like, oh, you want me as much as that's putting me in the mood, girl. Like, you know what I mean? Us guys, we cool with that too. So, if you in the mood and we're on the same page, like there's we did a whole episode about like ways to initiate. It's like, ladies, don't underestimate the power of initiating.
Totally.
You know what I mean? It can be a total game changer in the dynamic of a relationship. Mm-hmm. Just having your partner feel that sense of desire where they haven't before. And maybe that, because here's another thing I've seen in the DMs is like the partner not being a little selfish, so to speak, in the bedroom. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And one thing I was like thinking about, guys always having to feel like they have to, quote unquote, beg for sex or earn sex or whatever. That's their thing. And women complaining about, you only care about yourself in the bedroom, right? I already kind of know what your answer to this is going to be. Communicate, motherfuckers. No, right? So, like, what is that a common thing? First off, that you see amongst clients?
I heard you say a lot of things, so I want.
Okay, sorry. My mind is like going in a million places.
No, it's okay. I just want to make sure I heard you right. So, the common thing is it that men want to be sexual and women are not feeling it, or because their partner is more selfish in bed and not really. Right.
That's a factor in it. And I feel like one part of why we did the initiating sex episode was like to spark a little more selflessness in the guy when he feels that the desire is being reciprocated, and now it makes him want to reciprocate as well. That was just like kind of one thing, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think that's a really valid point, right? When we feel more desired and like our partner is leaning into the situation,
right,
then we feel less scarcity for our own pleasure, so we're willing to be more generous with pleasure. That makes a lot of sense. But I think it also is really important to look at that the other way around too. If people feel like they are being pined over for sex that is not mutual, they're a lot less likely to make it a priority. So, we're sort of like stuck in this impasse, right? And I think if you want to be sexual, it's really important to think about, how do I talk with my partner about what their sexual needs are to make sure that we're creating space for us to both get those needs met? And how do I emphasize with my partner that I'm prioritizing their needs equal to mine, right? And that's really important. But for people who are in longer term relationships, it's also about making sure that the non-sexual parts of your relationship are tidy, right? Because if there's a lot of resentment or a lot of frustration or unequal domestic labor or emotional labor,
that factors into the mood.
Totally.
Right.
Yeah. So I think a lot of people are just learning about those kinds of dynamics in relationships, which is great, because they've been playing a role in arousal and desire for centuries.
I mean, it makes total sense.
Yeah.
It even applies to guys. Like, a way for them to look at it is, hey, if you're stressed with like work, I actually just got that comment DM the other day. My man is never in the mood because he's too stressed to overwork. What do I do about that? You know what I mean? And one thing that I said to her is like, well, do you understand like some of his quote unquote sexual triggers and what puts them in the mood, you know, because men can be like women in a way where it's not just an on and off switch. Hey,
Right.
like we can't just turn this, you know, but if you understand his quote unquote sexual triggers, I got that from Sham Booty, then it's like, okay, you can start to see, okay, how can I relax you, get you out of that current mental space that you're in and get you into a more similar mental space that is in line with where I'm at, so that we're both, you know, this is not forced, right?
Yeah, not forced, but also I think it's really important to remember we have to have the bandwidth for sex. Right? So I think it's so key to think
we're not
about.
battery operated, ladies.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right? So like, how do you regulate with each other? How do you recognize when one or both of you is super stressed and prioritize, you know, however you need to de-stress so that you have the space mentally, physically, and sexually, and logistically to have sex? You know, it's really hard to think about creating space for like this epic sex marathon if you've got deadlines and the kids have been pawing all over you all day, or your boss is yelling at you and needs you to be to work early. I mean, it's hard sometimes to just turn your brain off and go over here. But for some people, those kinds of stressors actually act as an accelerant for sex. So it might make them more interested in being sexual because everyone's different that way.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I think the first step is just being aware of needing to be conscious of it, right? It's like I should kind of make mental space for this because it's going to come into play later. And just conscious of that before, you know, she hits you up like, hey, honey, you down? You know what I mean? And this is another reason why toys are your friend. Because if you ain't in the mood, that motherfucker is battery operated. That thing is in the mood. You got a wingman. See, fellas? It's a win-win.
It is a win-win. And there are lots of sex toys for people with penises, by the way.
Oh. I was like, wait, what? So, okay, yeah. No, I know.
Yeah,
I know.
toys are not,
Hey, fellas, there are.
There are lots of sex toys for people with penises. It's great. And I think, you know, when you say yes to toys in the bedroom, you get to benefit from that too. I mean, there's prostate stimulators, there are cock rings, there's strokers.
Personal. It was part of our occupation for a long time, actually. Part of the gig. I mean, it really was.
I'm sure it was.
And actually, when I first started implementing that into my sex life, I was like, holy shit, this is a game changer. I felt like, yo, I was empowered. Like, holy.
Yeah.
And I've never had my partner react the way that she did, and I was just like, this is awesome.
It's really awesome.
Right? So, fellas, man.
Yeah, sex toys are our
Get
friends.
hip to the game, man. We evolving out here. Yeah.
And did any of your sex partners feel like they weren't enough when you used
What do you
your
mean
cock
by
ring?
that?
Like, did they
not
feel
at all.
like
They were
that was threatening to them?
No, not at all. We kind of made it like a little adventure of ours. Let's go to a sex shop.
Nice.
Let's go, splurge, grab some things, whatever, and let's just have fun. And, something that she grabbed, and I was like, whatever, cool. I didn't really think much of it. And then after I saw the results, I was like, this is awesome. I'm never leaving home without this thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah, they can
so
be great.
If anything, she loved it.
Yeah. Good.
So it was great. Fellas, come on, man.
Yeah.
Get hip to the game. They just don't understand. They'll learn. But no, this has been an amazing conversation. I knew before we even sat down, I was just thinking to myself, how are we going to fit all the concerns and all these pressing concerns into one episode? So I was just like, I know from this, it's going to just breed even more questions now that we're kind of opening up this conversation. So I might be hitting you up again and be like, hey, we need to do a part 2.
Anytime.
If you
we're
cool
right
with
down the
that.
street from each other.
Yeah, so that was so cool to discover. I was like, this is perfect.
Yeah.
So, ladies and gentlemen, that's what we got for y'all this episode. Where can people find you online?
Yeah, thanks. So on TikTok and Instagram, I'm at Dr. Kate Balestrieri, and my website is modernintimacy.com. I really, really encourage you to check it out. We've got probably 150 blogs, free downloads, lots of things that you can check out to help your sex life and your relationships, mental health, all the stuff. So
They're giving out free game over there. They're giving out free game. ModernIntimacy.com, ladies and gentlemen. I did want to actually, I did have just one last question.
Okay.
How did you find us? Because I noticed you were following us. That's how I found you, was you were following us on TikTok.
Yeah, I saw you on TikTok.
And
you were on my For You page.
Yeah. What made you want to follow us?
So I saw an interview. I'd seen a couple of your videos kind of come through my feed, and I liked them. I thought you were really entertaining, and you asked good questions. And then I saw you interview one of the people on TikTok who, poor guy, just got absolutely slammed after posting a video.
I know who you're talking about.
Yeah. And
that's the video that you discovered us off of?
Well, no, I had seen a few of your videos before, but when I saw you interviewing that person, I thought you did a really nice job of calling him in, right? And I thought that's great. And I appreciated the fact that you were thoughtful with him, but also accountable, like holding him accountable and creating a space to have a different conversation. So I just really appreciated that. I
appreciate hearing that too. Every time I notice like somebody who's following us who's an actual profession, in like some sort of field. I mean, we get followed by like life coaches and therapists and psychologists, and every time it's just like, this is very flattering to me. I'll be honest. Like, this is very like, I take it as like a huge compliment.
Yeah.
So, but that it just kind of like makes me giggle thinking that that's the person that was like, okay, now I'm following. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because that was like so like spur of the moment. I looked at it as hey, this is a good kind of learning opportunity for a lot of people.
For a lot of people, and like that's what I really appreciated about that interview. And I love that it was a man interviewing another man, right? And it's very clear that you have very different perspectives on dating, and so I appreciated that it was another man sort of calling him in and not joining the crowd of bashing him, but just like, dude, we have to have a talk.
Let's have a bit a bro-to-bro talk, you know?
Yeah.
And I feel like I would love to see more of that, and I actually am seeing a little bit more of that.
Yeah.
And I feel like because it's like something in the like kind of man culture is like kind of like bro code type deal, which, you know, we're supposed to have each other's back. It's like, dude, if somebody's being a fucking dickhead, it's all good to call them out. You know what I mean?
It's important to call them out.
And it is important. It really is. And don't let your ego or what the fellas think of you taking your stance like affect you saying what you want to say. You know what I mean? I respect the hell out of all the dudes that I've seen doing this as well, like kind of following suit. And that's like, it's important. Like you said, it's very important. And I feel like it's important in kind of all areas of like the quote unquote culture, even around sex and relationships and dating. There's too much of a divide, and it's so like silly to me. It's like, ladies and gentlemen, can we just quit the bullshit and address what?
We all cry clear tears.
Yeah, right? Exactly.
So it's really, really important that we hold each other accountable, but in ways that honor each other's growth and mistakes and humanity. And I thought you just did a really nice job.
I appreciate that. I appreciate that.
Well, thank you again for having me on. This was great.
Thank you for being here, educating us, myself included. Ladies and gentlemen, please do a silent round of applause for our lovely guest this evening. Thank you so much for accompanying us on the podcast. It's a huge honor, and this is definitely an area I feel like was really important to touch on. I feel like it could help a lot of people listening. And, you know, we'd love to hear your feedback about everything that we discussed. If there's any other questions that y'all have, if there's anything that you wanted kind of an elaboration or clarification on, leave that in the comment section over on YouTube. You know, if you're listening to this on Spotify or Apple, you know, I hope at this point you could honor us with a follow or a subscription of some sorts. Give us a positive review, and make sure to follow Dr. Kate over on her social medias if you want to learn more. ModernIntimacy.com. Go check that out, y'all. And the YouTube channel. Shit. Free game, I'm trying to tell y'all. But anyway, ladies and gentlemen, thank y'all so much for being here. Thank y'all so much for lending us your ears and your eyes. And we will see y'all next time. Peace.